illustrated for Magic since Kamigawa Block, Wayne Reynolds has been one of the game's most iconic artists. With an instantly recognisable style, Reynolds has defined the look of entire factions in Magic, and, as seen with his Blightsteel Colossus artwork for the upcoming Double Masters set, can redefine them as well. But what does the man himself have to say about his continuing journey into Magic? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast. We talk about all things Magic flavour, design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And we have a very special guest on the podcast today. He was the driving force behind the design of Pathfinder. He is a Magic the Gathering illustrator extraordinaire and a true son of Leeds. We have on the show today Wayne Reynolds. Hi, Wayne.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, how's it going? You all right?
Yeah, it's going good. Yeah, how's everyone else?
Yeah, not too bad, not too
Excellent.
bad. It's a little bit grey down in London. Me and Nathan are London way. It's actually pretty shit weather. What's it like up in Leeds?
We're about 200 miles north of you, and it's pretty much the same. It's pretty grey up here as well.
That's just the UK as a whole, isn't
it? Yeah. Well, I think the UK, our weather is changeable, so it could be grey this morning, but who knows what it's going to do this afternoon.
Yeah, yesterday fluctuated massively. Like the morning was nice and sunny, then it went bleak, and then it got nice and sunny again from about 6 o'clock. So cannot prepare.
Yeah, English weather.
How have we been? We're three British people just immediately started talking about the weather
because it's what we do.
It's what we do.
Yeah,
yeah. We're good at talking about the weather and queuing.
Yeah.
You know, normally Brits are really mild-mannered, but if you jump a queue, we will lose our shit.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm literally sipping a giant cup of tea. So, I mean, we could not be more cliche if we tried.
Right. Well, all right. Let's move beyond our inherited cliches then, and let's talk about some fantasy stuff.
Okay.
So, one of the things that we definitely want to get onto today, and I've said this to you a million times in both our emails leading up to this interview and just a moment before we started recording, was that we want to talk to you, of course, about your phenomenal piece of Blightsteel Colossus for the upcoming Double Masters sets.
Okay.
We will get onto that in due course. But first, I just kind of want to get to know you a little bit. And Nathan, I know, is kind of interested. Like you've been doing all these fantasy illustrations now for years. You've become quite a big name in the fantasy world. This first question actually wasn't on our list of questions. It's more of just a generic, like, what's your background with like tabletop gaming, with like the fantasy sort of IPs? Like, how did you get into illustrating for fantasy?
When I left college, initially I was looking for work doing animation. Because that's what I studied at college, and that's kind of where I excelled. So I did kind of cartooning and animation. So when I left college, that's where I was looking for work, and I couldn't find any work. Certainly in Leeds, not a great animation capital of the country. But because I was already a gamer, so I played RPGs and read comics. I kind of fell back into, so I had contacts within the industry there, and they were kind of like small contacts. I think my first commissions was for play-by-mail games. So that's really dating it.
That's outside my wheelhouse. I like that.
Yeah.
What's involved in a play-by-mail game?
This was like before computers, so kind of like round about the dinosaur age, where you had you essentially you wrote down either what your army or your character was doing on a piece of paper, and then you mailed it into one central place. They all got everybody's responses, and then mailed out what happened next.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, okay.
That
So it's
sounds really cool.
Oh, so it's like remote D&D. Like every turn order, you kind of have a remit back and forth. Oh, that's really cool.
Analog remote D&D. That's so cool.
That is very cool. I like that. Obviously, you've got then the suspense waiting week by week to know what your adventure develops.
I know.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I like.
They were pretty big at one point. And I went to a few conventions. The people were kind of really into it, but then the internet and computers came along. I just went, right, we could do all this immediately. So,
yeah, exactly.
There's no need to wait for the post to come back.
So another great herald of society falling to the internet.
So like, yeah, you got your first jobs working on those kinds of games.
Yeah,
then, like,
those kind
where
of
did
games.
you go from there?
And then it was just a case of I was clearly getting work from this avenue, and then it was just a case of, in those days, you were sending out mail shots and things like that, so you were doing everything by post. And I think my first RPG commission was for Chaosium, so it was for Pendragon.
Nice.
And that was 1993, I think. So yeah, black and white, and again, you know, you were sending artwork off by mail. You know, the internet wasn't really around at that point. So yeah, everything was all analog. And then it just starts building up from there. I started doing comic work, so I was working for 2000 AD.
You worked on Judge Dredd for a few issues,
Judge
is that
Dredd
right?
and Slain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. And then I started working with Games Workshop and working on their comics, doing The Redeemer and Cal Jericho.
Yeah.
And again, really working. And then it got, and at the same time, I was doing historical illustration as well.
I did read a little bit about this when we were doing our sleuthing on you. What's involved in doing historical illustrations?
So, an historical illustration is you would get an author who would do the bulk of the research. The author would then present the research to the publishing company. They'd go through it. Then the publishing company would then give the artist the research with a list of illustrations to do and say, look, okay, so you need to do a Celtic warrior here. He's wearing this, and this, and here's the pictures that you take to do it. And being a history buff, I thought that was awesome. I really enjoyed it. So at that point, my career could have gone three ways. I could have done comic art, I could have done historical illustration, or I could have done fantasy. But as it happened, I was getting more work doing the fantasy artwork, and it paid better. So it's like having a mortgage to pay, that kind of thing.
Ties your hands a little. Yeah. I guess also the historical side, like using all of the accurate armor and things like that, obviously can come through to the fantasy setting as well. Because that's one thing I've noticed, that you use a lot of multifaceted plates and stuff in your artwork.
Yeah.
It's
a case of saying, like, knowing what things look like in real life, and part as doing the historical research, I also do reenactment as well. So I have replicas of historical equipment from kind of like 2nd century AD to 16th century.
There's video evidence on this. Nathan, I don't know if you saw it. Vorthos Mike actually posted up a picture of you, Wayne, wearing your full set 15th century armor with a pike
bloody
or a halberd.
Poleaxe.
A poleaxe, yeah.
Poleaxe, yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. And you're holding the Blightsteel Colossus print, is it?
Yes.
The original, yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, really cool.
One metallic Colossus holding the picture of another.
Exactly, another. That's
Colossus.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
Yeah, I don't know if you can move as dynamically in the armor that you're wearing as you've painted Blightsteel.
Yes, I can.
It's seasoned, practiced.
It's. I mean, a lot of there is a lot of mythology about, and Hollywood has done quite a lot of damage in this. Is in that you see people in these sort of like full suits of metal armor, and you think, oh wow, that must be really heavy, and how do they move around? Do they need winching on a horse? And if a soldier couldn't move in that way, then that soldier is no longer effective. So
there's no point.
It actually weighs about the equivalent to a modern day soldier with all their webbing and equipment on. So roughly equivalent to about 90 pounds. That's which is about half my body weight.
It's not too bad.
It's not too. I mean, it's heavy. Now, most replicas are made from mild steel, but their suits of armor have been made from pure steel, which is 2/3 lighter. So they've
Okay.
been carrying
Right.
even less than that. So it's really easy to kind of move around. So I can run, jump, I can do push-ups in it, I can fight, I can ride in it.
Been lied to my entire life. Lied to. So I've always loved the idea of gallivanting across a field doing this. It'd be amazing. But I always thought,
Yeah,
oh, God, I mean, I'm a small man. I couldn't carry that. But I mean, you've given me newfound newfound
New
yeah,
hope.
yeah.
options.
Yeah,
Exactly.
just get yourself some armor.
Yeah. Very...
But the idea is that once you know how the stuff looks like in real life or looks like in history, you can then start extrapolating and using your imagination to kind of like go, okay, well, this is what a poleaxe looks like in real life. Now let's imagine what a poleaxe would look like in a world full of magic and impossibilities. So let's imagine what a poleaxe looks like if it's made out of fire or something like that. And and there your imagination is the only limit. So that's kind of like my starting point when it comes to my artwork is nearly always history. So I kind of like look at that, and I think there is an element of my animation days and my comic days kind of coming into my artwork where you kind of like get lots of motion and exaggeration.
Oh hell yeah, yeah.
So it
Yeah.
kind of like all gets mixed up and eventually creates the artwork that you're seeing. So it's like a combination of lots of different aspects that gets messed around in my head and then comes out on paper.
Yeah, like
Nice.
the dynamism of your artwork is really cool. Like the movement you can see. Like I love the angles you do. You always seem to be throwing your characters from one side of the art to the other, and I
Yeah, everything's at a
love
Dutch
that.
angle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. But it makes you so much more involved in it as well. Like you can say
Yeah,
also with
yeah.
like the layering effect of it just pops that little bit more. And when you are in a pack of 15 other cards, like it does help to have the art jump out at you. Which
Oh,
compared to
good.
some of the modern homogenized artwork doesn't necessarily do so. So it's quite
Mm.
nice. It's really nice to still
Thank
see
you.
it.
So yeah, you mentioned your other sort of avenues of work that you've done. That you've worked on comics. We just spoke about all the
Yeah.
historical artworks that you've done. But I suppose, I mean, I don't know. You could completely disagree. I suppose the two areas that at least I know you best from, and I think a lot of fantasy players know you best from, is your work on Magic the Gathering, which is obviously what we're primarily focused on because that's what we play. But you're also, I think it's fair to say, probably the driving force behind the look of Pathfinder, the Pathfinder RPG. Like you did the designs for the first edition, and then was it last year you got to redesign for second edition?
Yes.
You redesigned
Yeah.
pretty much everything that you've done previously, and
Some
most of it.
of what I've done. Yeah.
Yeah, and so working on these two, if we focus on those two IPs, I suppose, Magic and
Sure.
Pathfinder, they have a shared heritage through Pathfinder being sort of descended from D&D, which is produced by Wizards of the Coast, but obviously Pathfinder isn't anymore. Magic's still obviously under Wizards. Like, what are the differences, if there are any, between your approach or your style when working on these two different IPs that you're so well known for?
I think the major difference is that Magic is visually fluid. So because the setting changes with each new set, and sometimes with each setting, a slightly different art styles required. So, for instance, Innistrad was a heck of a lot darker, and I really had to sort of tone down that sort of cartoonish aspect to my art,
Sure.
or that sort of animation aspect to my art, to make it look a lot darker and a lot more serious. So there are adaptations that are required for Magic depending upon what set is being done for. So the unset with
old Buzzbuck. Oh yeah.
yeah. So I was able to really kind of push those shapes, and do kind of like really exaggerated and really dynamic pictures, as opposed to Innistrad where everything had to be just a heck of a lot more darker.
Yeah, there's a big difference between your homunculus and the hammer jammer.
Yes, exactly.
Big
Yeah, yeah.
I saw a couple of interviews with you that were on YouTube last year when you were talking through some of the more specific redesigns of some of your Pathfinder
Oh yeah.
characters, and something that really caught me. I must admit I'm not a big Pathfinder player, so I can't quite remember the names. But you were talking about one of your elven characters and about how you had to elongate their limbs and you had to kind of change their skull structure. And I suppose one of the big things looking from the outside in to what you can kind of get away with is that with magic, I suppose if you have an art director that's trying to give direction notes to sort of 15 different artists for a set, and they say this is what the humans look like on Innistrad, or this is what the core look like on Zendikar, you have to kind of follow these bylines. Do you feel like you get sort of more freedom with that kind of remit where you can kind of still input your own style, or do you prefer to have something like Pathfinder where you still might have an art director but you have more a broad sort of look to what you can go for?
No, because both IPs have they allow a degree of artistic freedom, so they can go, okay, well, this is what a Pathfinder elf looks like, and you have a fairly large remit within that, as long as it hits those visual notes. So, like a Pathfinder elf has really, really long ears. Their eyes are all one color, and they're really, really thin. Whereas a magic elf varies from set to set. But you can kind of like, as long as you sort of within magic, as long as you kind of stay within the parameters of the style guide, then you have a leeway to push it in a certain direction. And then it's up to the art editor to say, well, you've kind of pushed this too far that it doesn't kind of resemble a magic elf anymore, so just dial it back a little bit. But more often than not, both Magic and Pathfinder, both the art editors for both IPs really, really encourage this sort of artistic interpretation, and with both IPs, with Pathfinder, I kind of did a lot of the set building artwork at the beginning, and with Magic, I've taken part in concept pushes, which creates the look for the new set coming out. So it's good to be kind of like creating imagery, and it's part of the job that I really, really like doing. I really like world building, so I like creating things that never were, and then working out kind of like the societies and things like that. That's what kind of really gets me excited. So it's why I like working on things like Pathfinder and Magic, because there is that sort of world building aspect where you're kind of telling a story from one image, and that's the thing that excites me.
That's cool, because I think one of the things, and I know Nate, you mentioned it earlier, this idea that there's a homogenization sometimes in magic art, because there are so many cards. There's like thousands, and Vorthos Mike was talking about the target of how we describe as the target, and Wizards wants most of the artwork to be sort of center. But so it's nice to know that artists, even if they have to kind of conform to a style guide, do have this big remit, and that art directors like Cynthia Shepherd, for example, can say to you, you have this kind of this big leeway. That's really cool. What are your favorite pieces that you've done, if you have any favorite pieces? Are there any that have stuck out to you either because of the process or how it turned out, or you just, looking back on it, you just objectively like what you did at the time?
It's when you say
big
favorites,
question.
it is, because and most artists, most artists that I speak to are very, very similar to me in that we are our own worst critics, so that you do the best work that you possibly can, given the time allowed and the subject matter, and then kind of 2 or 3 weeks down the line, sometimes even days down the line, when you've finished, you look back at a piece of artwork and you go, I should have done that different. Or you start going, damn it, I did that arm too long, or I should have painted that red.
It's too late, it's gone.
It's too late, it's gone. And you start pulling your own artwork apart, because you're constantly evolving and constantly moving forward, and constantly trying to work out different ways, and artwork is an exploration like that. So so I would say rather than favorite pieces, it's significant pieces. So the pieces that are significant for me are the pieces of card art where I'd kind of made a breakthrough, or I'd learned something new within the artwork, and none of them are like popular cards.
Sure.
You mentioned one earlier, which is the Furtive Homunculus,
Hmm.
and that's actually that's a significant one, because I'd done something there and gone, oh wait a minute, I've discovered something new here, and someone had said at the time that it was like, Wayne, this kind of looks like your artwork, but not. And I thought,
wow.
wait a minute, I've done something here. I've done something different. And again, it's all part of that development and exploring with different things. So yeah,
I'd say it's one of the few ones that kind of pops out to me as being, doesn't like fall into what I don't think you have like a very you have a nice specific direction. I think it's one of the ones that kind of sits on the slightly towards the edge. But I think that's nice because it shows you've got a bit of a spectrum. It's cards like Silence I wouldn't have thought were yours. Things like that has a bit of a difference to say as like I'd say Tavriel, like the Reckoner with all the jagged red and everything. And then you look at something like Silence. Yeah. You look at something like Silence, and again, like most of your artworks do have a very distinctive, sharp style to it. But it's quite nice to see that, as you say, you do get to play around a little bit sometimes.
Well, Nath, I know there's definitely one set of cards that you absolutely adore, which was when you started playing all the way back in Lorwyn block.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. These are the goblins. Yeah. If you can get Face Filter past an art director, you can do anything you want. When I don't think you can do anything you want.
Big
honestly.
fan of the Lorwyn goblins.
Yeah,
for sure.
like I grew up on Mad Auntie, so I've stared at your art more than any other artist.
And Lorwyn was my favourite setting to work on. I just have fun. I don't know what it was about the setting. I mean, maybe it was the Englishness of it all.
It did feel very English whimsy, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's all like, British Isles fairy tales. A lot like Eldraine, but with that it was a bit more raw, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was felt like a set taking itself seriously, where Lorwyn felt like it could breathe. Like a lot of the artists seem to have a little bit more, as I said, more fun with the cards. Like it has a goblin throwing goats, for God's sake. Like the ideas in the set. Like this is probably my favourite form of goblin that we've seen, and obviously you've done quite a few over the years. But I think this is my favourite style, just because it seems so different to the rest of them. I feel like these are the goblins that the rest of the goblins of the multiverse would probably ignore if they could. So it's things I say like Face Filter. Like I don't understand how I could ever forget a card like Face Filter. So yeah, the fact it can stick with you for so much is fantastic.
Sweet. All right. Well, that's Lorwyn, which I think was the second set that you ever did. I know you started in Kamigawa, which we discerned was 2004. Is that what we said? Blimey. Which is when they started playing, and then I started playing around the time of Innistrad. So I have a real soft spot for Fiend Hunter, which was the white. Was that? And I can see what you mean now that you pointed out that for Innistrad, you have to kind of change up your style, because in my head, Fiend Hunter, whilst it does have a lot of jagged edges, the kind of contrasted edges are actually a lot softer in that, because of the kind of sort of scene that it's going for. And I just love that kind of wrecked, battle-scarred paladin that's just dispatched something horrible, like, with the bloody mace that he's kind of clung to. He's not a holy avenger anymore. He's just something that beats up monsters because he has to. I think I love that whole kind of idea. But you've been doing commissions. I don't know if you've been in every set, but there's been very few downtimes.
Not quite every set.
And in fact, looking to the future, like I think we'll get to where we want to go now. Whereas let's talk about your Blightsteel Colossus that you did for Double Masters. So the Blightsteel Colossus is quite an important card in Magic, not only because it's a good card that people want to play across lots of different formats, like mechanically, but I think the look of Blightsteel from the original Chris Rann treatment of the character is very striking in its own way. This figure with the kind of faded background, which he almost sinks into, but he's also defined. It's a very looming, very ominous, big figure. And then we get the previews, or the little kind of taster, because Double Masters isn't quite fully released yet. There's not many previews for it, but they gave us the little tasters. And then we saw your full art Blightsteel with the bright orange background and the dynamic movement of Blightsteel at a Dutch angle. He's grabbing up the Volshock humans. He's doing all this, that, and the other. Like, how do you get to that from what Chris Rand did? Because they're both phenomenal artworks, but they're so different in so many ways.
Chris is a tough act to follow because because he's a phenomenal artist. So when I saw the words on the art description, Blightsteel Colossus, I thought, what? Wait, what? What? You want me to do? You want me to do a version of this when like the first version is just so done. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think I cried for a few days.
The honesty, I love it.
I kind of had to rack my brains about how am I gonna do justice to this? And the only way to kind of do it was to do something different, and just and just put my own spin on it. So yeah, it had to be a lot more dynamic, and then I had I had to create these sort of contrasting colors as well. It was so it was the Blightsteel Colossus, but just done in a completely different way, and that was the only way I could think of doing it, because to do it any other way, you're going to get those people that just go, "Oh, you're just copying Chris."
Well, this is what I think is really clever, though, because you've basically because you haven't really changed the look of the Darksteel Colossus at all. Like you've kept the same same appendages, the same notes and the same striations, and obviously you've just developed it into your own. I think that's probably much, if that was deliberate by your part, very clever, because you're not going to piss anyone off who really likes the Chris one. They're going to see it in, obviously, because we've seen between certain artworks that it's radically different. It's almost complete reinvention of the character. Was that deliberate on your part, or was that a request? If we can pry that.
What do you mean a reinvention? What the Blightsteel was a little bit just more active.
Well, there's the fact that it looks, because of the visual aspect of him, like his dimensions and everything is basically identical. Were you asked specifically to keep him looking like that, or did you have an option to completely change how he looked?
I think I don't think it was ever mentioned in the art brief, but I think I took it upon myself, and the art director Tom was in agreement that there wasn't really any. The Blightsteel Colossus had to look like the Blightsteel Colossus. I don't think there was any kind of leeway. So it's the same creature that we saw in Mirrodin. Just depicted doing something else.
Doing something, exactly. Yeah, it's also really good to see him being actively involved.
Well, this was my thought on it, because it was almost, when you give new artists carte blanche to do what they want with characters, but you keep the design, it's almost like you're giving that character new lore, because we didn't know, for example, that a Blightsteel Colossus could move this way. And it sounds ridiculous for a character that has no lore behind it other than the artworks that we see and the kind of the setting of Mirrodin, what we can extrapolate from that. But you have these two things, and it's definitely the same figure. So to see it moving in such a different way, in such a completely different scenario, but still having that same energy and that same power, it's like you've been able to extend the lore of this character without saying anything, and just doing, like having the character doing, which is just a real nice sort of visual trick, I suppose, is that you can impart that knowledge just through your artwork, which is obviously what it's all about.
And that took some working out. It's just working out how all the plates moved when the Colossus moves as well, and and kind of like how they look like, when the Colossus arms raise. It's like, okay, so the shapes don't look like they do when his arms down. So that was part of the challenge as well, and also I didn't realize just how Colossus it was.
How big it was.
Yeah.
This is great, because we didn't get scale the last time. Obviously, we know 1111 is going to be big. We know that, but we didn't see the scale in the original artwork, so it's great to see, like, oh yeah, this is a big boy.
You have humans for scale.
Exactly. Yeah, which is very good.
Sweet. I mean, yeah, great. I mean, I'm sure once we get it in our hands as well, the actual physical cardboard itself, like it's always nice when you can actually physically hold a piece of artwork as opposed to just seeing it digitally. I mean, I probably already know the answer to this one, but I think it would be remiss if I didn't ask. Like the fact that did they tell you it was going to be borderless? Like, was there any difference in the scale that you drew it, or did you know how it was going to be sort of represented on the card?
Yeah, I knew how it was going to be represented on the card, so I knew that the main piece of art would be in the top part, and that the text block would overlay it. So there's less detail at the bottom than there is at the top.
But you
Cool.
got to extend, obviously. You didn't have
Yeah.
to squash it down, as it were.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like me and Nathan did, obviously our little bits of research, looking through card art galleries and things of your work. I mean, not that we really needed to, because I think we pretty much knew every card that you did, but just to refresh our memory. And this kind of moves on to our next question. The next question is, like, what kinds of commissions do you enjoy working on the most? But I just wanted to kind of offer this out. Did you know that you've only done 4 land cards in Magic the Gathering? Everything else is figures. Or it does. I mean, I don't know if those two things are connected, like what you enjoy doing versus what you've gotten to do for Magic. But
they're
it's
very
just worth
connected.
noting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't like doing landscapes. It's just because they don't move.
Yeah, that's no dynamism.
There's no dynamism, and similarly, it's kind of vehicles. So if I'm doing vehicles, I don't particularly like doing vehicles. So I try and find some way of depicting them moving. So the Mizzet tank and what's the one from the Unmade with the Goblin car? Right, it's escaped my the name escaped my head.
The Joyride Rigger.
Joyride Rigger. So both of those are they've got to be vehicles, sort of like mid movement, so kind of like the wheels or tracks have got to be off the ground some way, so that I've got to put in some kind of motion onto essentially the shape of something that remains constant. And I think that's why I like painting or like depicting people or creatures more than kind of landscape buildings, environments, because their shape constantly shifts and moves. So I think that kind of thing appeals to me a lot more than landscapes do.
I can hear the chitty chitty bang bang of the Joyride Rigger when I look. You can hear it moving. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I can absolutely see it. I mean, it's funny because again, Artie's Hobble's a land I probably played more than any other, and it's funny that most lands of that really didn't get that kind of detail, and you still managed to go, nah, I can. If you're gonna give me a land, I'm gonna go all out. Thanks, cheers.
Yeah, Auntie's Hovel definitely doesn't look like a land card at all. No,
it's got a lot going on, which is fantastic. But yeah, I can definitely see what you mean. You're considering the movement that you have in your cards. Yeah, I can imagine an island isn't necessarily quite as inspirational.
I mean, we were talking earlier about your affinity for like armor and weaponry and all that kind of thing, which you got from your historical sort of interest and things like that. Do you tend to find that do you get asked to put in so much detail into the armor of your characters, or do you get characters that in the back of your mind you kind of think, they given me this because they know I'm going to put like a lot of armor or like a lot of weaponry onto this character, or is that something that you just instinctively go for?
I think it's something that I instinctively go for, and I think our art directors are probably expecting me to do that as well. So I work very, very closely with my art directors. So all of the art directors on Magic are all kind of really, really savvy, and the art directors for Pathfinder are as well. And I trust their judgments absolutely implicitly. They know what's best for the product. So yeah, if they give me kind of like a human or a character to do, they know that I'm I'm going to go all out on the costume detail, because the voices in my head tell me to do it.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason they give you arms dealer.
Yeah,
They know you're
yeah,
not just going to do one sword. You're going to go, no, there's the whole armory.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That's why, especially because you've been working with them for so long now that they must have obviously there's that relationship, but they know that they're going to know kind of what they're going to get. I imagine there's certain characters they go, this is a Wayne character right here. Let's get him doing this.
I've no idea whether they do that or not.
I'd love to think that they do. They have all
Yeah.
these names out, and they have like the artist names, and it's kind of like, well, who can we give to who? Who works for what?
I think there are certain cards that they do go, this is a Chris Ron card, this, or something like that, so they know the kind of strengths and weaknesses of each artist, and get the best out of them for the artwork.
That's really cool. I'm going to ask you about something a little bit off piste. I didn't know whether you didn't know in terms of I didn't prefix it before. You did the San Diego Comic-Con flip Planeswalkers a few years ago, the all black ones.
Yeah.
I don't have no idea what the answer to this question is. Is there any difference in because the art style is so striking compared to pretty much any other Magic card, the all black with the highlights of color? Was there a difference in your process for that, or did you know that's how they were going to be presented?
So yeah, when I received the commission, when I received the art description, that I was told this is kind of how we want them. So just black and white, and then an aspect of color about them that sort of denotes the character that's being depicted. So yeah, it was kind of like it was straight black and white. So there's no gray, there's no in between. It's either black or white. So you're using a lot of negative space in order to describe your highlighted areas. So it becomes very, very contrasted piece of artwork. And you kind of have to do a mental shift in order to depict something like that, especially if you're used to doing mid-tones. So you start to have to then work out, right, so you're not going to see any mid-tones here, so how am I going to depict this character and get the silhouette right and recognizable without having any of those sort of like mid-tones. And I think my time doing black and white comic artwork stood me in good stead there.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and thinking it does seem a lot like I'm looking at like your early sketches for Pathfinder. It's like you kind of almost, it brings you back to your roots. Yeah, it almost brings you back to your roots. It's quite nice. I like it.
Yeah. So yeah, I took that approach. I think that it at least gave me a little bit of a head start. That I had at least a starting block at which to go by, and then sort of kind of start creating this kind of different way of depicting the characters.
How long ago was this now? What we're looking at?
San Diego Comic Con,
2015.
16, 2016.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I was thinking because we're looking at the laser set. There's more of a comic style that's becoming infused into the game, and it's kind of funny to look at these because these were the first cards that really stood out to me as being, that is completely different. I mean, obviously we've seen like the full arts and everything like that. But this is the first time like you can't make Magic cards black and white. That's not a thing. I mean, it works and it's beautiful. So yeah, it's great that we can that we're coming back around to that a little bit. I imagine we might potentially see you doing some more stuff like this in the future. Hopefully, this is my fingers crossed thing. If it comes down to a coin flip, please weigh my opinion in your choice.
Sure. Okay. When I was offering out the potential questions for this episode to Wayne, this is for our listeners, there were definitely things in there which he went, can't talk about that, don't know about that, and so we don't know either. So if there's any burning questions that you've had, believe me, we probably asked them and got there's an NDA there, can't really say much, which is more than fair. Something that we'll kind of move on then. Something that I was talking about with a lot of players online, and me and Nathan spoke to Vorthos Mike about this extensively a couple of episodes ago, is the kind of opening up of visual art styles in Magic. I mean, specifically Magic, because that's what we do, but I think in a lot of different fantasy IPs, you're obviously everyone's art style has evolved. Like you've evolved your art style over time or changed it with different art directors. But do you feel like fantasy artwork in general is going in a good place, in a good direction, or do you think maybe there's something we can go back to? Like, what are your current feelings on the sort of art zeitgeist at the moment with fantasy IPs?
I don't know. I think that fantasy art is evolving from how it was, kind of done near. I don't know. We're kind of like looking 40 years ago, now, and kind of 30 or 40 years ago, where certainly fantasy artwork has changed because the audience has changed, and because the audience has changed, the artwork needs to evolve to reflect that audience. So it's kind of like, fantasy art is now no longer that the kind of like the sphere of white dudes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and so consequently, we're kind of like getting much more interesting subject matter and a much more diverse subject matter, that's going to appeal to kind of like a more diverse range of gamers, because gaming's for everybody. And the artwork, I think, needs to reflect that, and become inclusive.
Yeah, there's only so many knights versus dragons you can do.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I think, like you say as well, our imaginations have started to expand as well. So the way that we depict stuff has changed as well. When you kind of like looking back, some of the original artwork, it's still kind of based on their understanding of kind of like what a dragon looks like, but then what subsequent artists in next generations do is they look at what's gone on before and go, oh right, that's pretty cool, but what if I depict it like this, and it becomes this, not just a kind of like a personal evolution, it becomes a generational evolution that speaks to the next generation and the next generation, because things don't stay still, things are in flux and they change.
That's
The
fantasy stuff, yeah. Especially, it needs to
yeah,
have,
yeah,
it needs to continue
absolutely.
being fantastical. It can't just be the same thing, otherwise it's no longer
That's
fantastical.
that's right. Yeah, it's when kind of like in the 1970s, when people thought about the future, it was a heck of a lot different the way that we think about the future now, because times moved on, and fantasy artwork has to move along with the times as well, and also techniques have changed. Now with the introduction of digital artwork, it's kind of like opened up a completely new door. I'm still a traditional artist. Everything I do is acrylic on board. So in a lot of respects, I'm stuck in my way, but that way works for me. But there are artists now using different mediums, and that medium is just as valid, so use that medium to create these sort of fantastical images, and take it in another direction. That's not to say that the future is digital. I mean, the future is both kind of like traditional and digital. I think there's room for artistic expression in both ways.
That's really cool to hear you say, because I think there's maybe an underlying bias that if you say that someone's a digital artist, that's almost like you're saying that their artwork isn't as like toughly fought with, or toughly processed as someone who's working traditionally. So as someone who is a self-proclaimed traditionalist, to say digital artwork is a valid art form for the people who use it, like that's a really cool thing to hear you say.
Absolutely, there's stuff that digital artists doing that I can't even imagine how to do. So there's a skill there and there's a process there that I certainly can't do. So that doesn't make their artwork less valid than my techniques. It just means that their technique's different. It's it's kind of like a stonemason and a carpenter almost. They're both creating beautiful pieces of artwork. They're just doing it in different mediums.
Yeah, I really hope we don't lose the traditional methods as well, because I think they complement each other really well. And I think there is not an argument you said, there is a threat potentially that if everything did move to digital artwork, you'd lose some of the individualism. And again, if a world without Wayne Reynolds artwork to me isn't a world worth playing Magic in. So
Thank you.
that obviously has
Thank
been
you very
biased on
much.
my part.
That's a kiss off.
It's very
I
kind.
know. So yeah, brown nosing massively. But no, the point I mean is that I'm glad to see that you're not willing to bend, but it's in like you're sticking to your guns and you're sticking to your traditional methods, and it's not something that's being shunned out or pushed aside. It's something that's still being brought in and still being enveloped and surrounded by. So it's good.
I think Magic is Magic is great in the way that there is room within the magical visuals, for both traditional and digital artwork, and there's room for like a massive variation of art styles, that are all just as valid as each other, but they're just an individual's take on the reality that's magic, or it's an exercise of their imagination, their take on this. So it's kind of like, when you get a magic elf, you have an artist who's sort of taken it in one direction, and then you have an artist that's, it still looks like a magic elf, but they've done it differently, and they're equally valid. It's just a different way of imagining it, and Magic can kind of accommodate that variation in sort of like expression and imagination. And I think that's probably why, other than that, Magic's an awesome game, but the artwork is kind of like just so varied and dynamic and interesting. That's what's keeping it going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess if you're doing something like, say, when the Harry Potter films were made, if you didn't like one of the actors portraying a certain character, well, suffer it. You've got 8 films of that, unfortunately. whereas in a Magic set, you can have the ballots or whatever in your set, and it could be, as you say, you can pick which one you like as your favorite, and obviously see the diversity as well, which is, again, as I say, great, amazing. I mean, these are fantasy environments; they shouldn't be dictated,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely. It's and again, Magic sets change as well. So this year, we're doing a set about goblins, and next year, it could be a completely different set.
Steampunk Inventors Fair. Yeah, the difference between those two is bizarre. Bizarre, but,
Cool. Well, that kind of comes us on then to our last question then that I kind of prefixed to you. And I have no idea what your answer is going to be to this. Like, who are the artists, whether it's in Magic the Gathering or any other kind of fantasy IP that you're aware of? Who are the artists, or maybe even the art styles, if you want to go broader, that you're excited by at the moment? Like, we're talking about, like, the artwork has to evolve, whatever, but who are the people producing it that you personally, as an artist, really like and kind of dig?
It's got to be, well, Chris Rahn. I'm going to say Chris Rahn right off the bat, because of Blightsteel Colossus. I mean, Chris is a fantastic artist. His use of color is just absolutely amazing. And I like his work because it's not like mine. And again, I talked about digital artists doing things that I can't understand or know how they do. Chris is doing something that, I don't know how to do that, and that's why I like his artwork. But there are lots of other artwork, and pretty much every Magic artist is phenomenal at their trade. And sort of like, I don't know. I like Steve Prescott because
oh sure, yeah.
He and I work in a very, very similar manner. Same with Jesper as well. Jesper Icing.
Yeah. Well, you and Jesper definitely have that sort of inherent. I'm not going to say whimsy, because not every piece that you do is whimsical, but there's definitely that element of there's a lighter side to everything that you do. Yeah.
And both so. Steve and Jesper do it amazingly well, and then you get artists like Tyler Jacobson, and he's just like a really good all-rounder. He's a digital artist, but he's got a wonderful painted style to it. Or you get, and then with a juxtaposition to that, you get the kind of like the realism that Steve Belladin does, which is the detail there. Such amazing observation. Randy Galagos is another one that does that as well. That does kind of like these amazingly kind of realistic and well observed paintings. Raymond Swanland is another
Oh
one.
yeah, Raymond. Well, Raymond Swanland's one I think is very in terms of dynamism within the pictures.
Yeah,
You two complement each other amazingly. If I just do ladies facing left and men facing right and make them battle within the deck, beautiful, fantastic. War of the artists, fantastic.
Yeah, so there are other magic artists. I mean, John Avon's landscapes,
Right.
and I like those because I can't do that. Or
Sure.
Sam Burley, his landscapes, they're just amazing. So, again, I'm admiring them because I can't conceive how I do it, what they're doing, so there is an absolute admiration there. So
that's really good to hear. I like that.
Yeah, I'd rather you say that, than say, oh well, we're all great, but I think these people are fine, but I do what they do is better. Like it's nice to hear that you can admire the people who do things that you can't, or you think you can't do. That's a really cool thing to hear.
Absolutely, and it comes from just appreciating the different styles and different approaches, because as artists we're not a one size fits all. We all some of our creation processes kind of overlap, but our creation processes, from what I can discover, are fairly unique. So when I speak to artists and we talk about how we create stuff, and artists say to me, "Well, do you do this?" And I go, "What?
No.
What? Oh, I know what's happening here. You've mistaken me for somebody who knows what they're doing." So, but I've worked out that there's stuff. So I kind of do all the regular stuff that artists do, so I do the techniques, but there's something that I do, and I've worked out that I think I work in a fairly unique way to what a lot of other artists do, and I can't explain why, because when artists ask me, "Oh, well, do you do this?" I go, "Oh yeah, I do that, yeah," but there's just something that I'm doing.
I think so, yeah. There's something in the layering, my friend. Something in the layering.
Let's say it layering. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I do know what you mean. It's funny that you say that, because I mean, as you say, each artist does have their individualism, and it's funny that even, I mean, as both Andy and I are creatives in our own rights, and it is funny that it's really hard to pick apart your individualism sometimes because you have no objectivity to it. It's entirely subjective. You're just like, well, I just do what I do, so it's really hard for me to pick apart how and why I do it. But obviously, the whole point is that everyone does have their own very specific way of doing the same processes, and that celebration of all of the different ones all together, I think, is what makes magic really, really, really interesting.
It really is, and I get messages from people, and they say, "Oh, I like your artwork. How do I, how do I do what you do? How do I paint like you?" And I reply and say, "Well, the thing is, you don't paint like me. What you need to do is learn how to paint like you." Because then it's whatever you produce is going to be truer to you, and it's going to be better as well, because it's individual to you, and I think that's the message I guess I want to put across is the kind of the ways of different ways of doing artwork is valid and down to the individual. So
I can see, because you were like self you had a degree of self-taught to yourself, right?
I had a heck of a lot of self-taught.
Yeah.
I mean, I did animation at college, so that didn't really set me up for doing painted artwork.
But then I guess then you can build up that instinct of what you feel is right. And I guess in this day and age where there's all these tutorials where you can paint by numbers essentially, the thing I guess that to take away is that do find your individualism in it. Otherwise you're as soon as the video stops, you stop because you're not being told what to do anymore. But yeah, no, that's great. Especially say so coming from a self-taught background, to have that individualism that you can't even explain is really nice. I think that's one of the greatest pulls to creatives is when they don't even understand their own genius. They're like, it just happens, I got lucky and
Are
I
you saying
followed
you're
it.
a genius, Nathan? Is this
No,
you
no,
saying that you think you're a genius?
No, why did you have to? I was being complimentary. Why? Oh, why do I always come across as a douchebag in these?
I
I
don't
try
know.
so
Well,
hard to be nice.
there's only one constant.
Oh, great.
Well, I mean, on that then, I think we're just about running out of time. I'm just going to leave it there, Nathan.
Control.
We're just about running out of time. Wayne, thank you so much, man, for coming on and talking to us today about everything that we spoke about.
Thank you for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. If people want to see more of your artwork, not that they would have trouble doing so because you are the man and you are everywhere, but is there anywhere that you would want to send them to see any of your work or anything that you don't think maybe gets enough spotlight that you'd want people to see?
I have a website, which is www.waynereynolds.com. And I also have Facebook, which is Wayne Reynolds Artworks or Wayne Reynolds Artist, and Instagram, which is Wayne Reynolds Art. Most of the new stuff, kind of Facebook and Instagram, gets updated a heck of a lot more because it's kind of just more fluid.
Sure. You can send questions to us, guys. Our Twitter is @mtflavouring. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. Hit us up on there. Hit that follow button as well if you want to see more interviews with awesome magic artists like Wayne, because we love talking to them. We hope you like listening to them as well. My personal Twitter is @AndyManface. Nathan, yours is
@TheFoxInTheMoon for all things. We're going back to Lorwyn. I can feel it. I can feel it. This is it. That's my addendum to the to the podcast.
I'm not going to refute it. And other than that, guys, as ever, thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.